Hey, welcome to this video. We're going to be doing WPA2 EAP or .1x or WPA Basically, our way of authenticating our Wi-Fi users. This is very common in sort of corporate environments, particularly if you've got a Microsoft environment with a certificate signing authority. But effectively, what we're going to do is, like we've done it before with PSK, to secure our Wi-Fi on a MikroTik, we're going to be using basically like a username and password type setup, but then there's also going to be a certificate element to that as well, and we're going to be controlling certainly the credential side on this Radius server. Now, when it comes to the certificate's going to live between the Radius server and then the client that's connecting to the SSID, not the MikroTik. But what we are going to use the MikroTik for is to generate those certificates, and then we're going to put them onto the relevant devices, and we'll go through the do's and don'ts, or what you need to do for each of those.
Before we jump into today's tutorial, I just want to say a quick thank you to our sponsor, Admiral Platform, which is the easiest way to monitor, manage, and maintain all your MikroTik devices from one cloud dashboard. So adding a device is really simple. Grab the config, paste it in your terminal, and then you're done. Your device is online and ready to monitor. With Admiral, you get live monitoring, up-to-date backups, firmware management, and even remote access. Everything you need to keep your MikroTik network under control, whether it's one device or a fleet. And here's a bonus: if you use my email address, hello@mikrotikmasters.com, as the referral email, you'll get a second month for free. If you want to see Admiral in action, check out my full review and walkthrough, and there's a link in the description as well below. Alright, let's get back to the tutorial.
Okay, so here's my MikroTik. I've got it set up as a standard Wi-Fi router, just a HAP AX2, so I've just got Wi-Fi enabled already, configured. I've just disabled them for now, but I've got my SSIDs, my bands. The only thing I haven't got configured is my security section yet, because we're going to go through that. Basic LAN, WAN, all set up. There's my WAN, dynamically getting an IP address from my dev network as normal, and there's my LAN setup. Some other things of note is I've got DNS being given out. The router itself is going to be the DNS server for my LAN, and the reason for this is make sure you've got allow remote requests checked if you're using your MikroTik as DNS server. But then under the static, I've got this entry here, which is my Radius server, and that will become clear when we come to the certificate part. My as I mentioned, my Radius server is running on Ubuntu. It's all set up. I've already installed that. I've got a video about how you can do that specifically for this task, for using Radius for your MikroTik for things like PPPoE, if you're running a PPPoE server, or running hotspot. So if you want to use the username and password credentials stored on a database on your FreeRADIUS server, then that would be the way to do it. That side of the setup is fairly similar to what we're going to do. The more complex element is going to be this certificate part of it. So all the other thing to mention is I've got PHP my admin running on to manage my database, but again, that's also covered in that other video. So back on the MikroTik, let's start with our certificates. So we've got system certificates. Now we're going to create 3 certificates. We're going to do the CA, so the certificate authority. We're going to do a client one, which is going to be installed on our client device, and then we're going to do a server one, which is going to be installed on our Radius server. So let's start by adding our CA one. So we're just going to keep these names fairly generic, just for this example. We won't fill any of this information out, but obviously you can for your real certificates. And the common name, we'll just give it the same again. Key usage for the CA is going to be key cert sign and control sign. Okay, now we go ahead and sign this one. Actually, before we do, one other thing, just increase that days valid add an extra 0 on the end or something, because otherwise it's going to expire every year. Okay, now we're ready to sign. We have to do any changes to it before we do this signing part. So don't select the CA, because this is going to be the CA. Just hit start. They're done pretty quickly. Now we can create our other two. We'll start off with our client certificate, and again just call this one cert-client. Now this could be obviously this is going to be unique for all your client devices, so you could put in a email address here, and then we would do the common name could be that email address again, and then when we do our subject alt name, we could do email and put that in there. However, we won't for this example because we just got the single certificate, and again increase that days. And now this one is just going to be TLS client. Okay, and now last one is going to be our server one. Now this is the one for the Radius server itself. This is the bit we need to be a bit mindful of. So common name and subject alt name. So we're going to use a DNS fully qualified domain name for these two. What I've done is I've added in my DNS settings, I've enabled this allow remote requests, and then if you look in my DHCP settings, my network, the DNS server I'm giving out is the MikroTik itself, so that means the MikroTik is the DNS server for the network, and then that gives me the ability to add these static ones in here. So I've created this one here, so this is only will resolve to the IP address of the Radius server, but it will only happen with inside this network. So you can use anything you like, you don't have to be a domain that you own. And then we can just has to make sure that whatever you set here is going to be needed later on when you install it on your client device, or when you connect on your client device. So it doesn't have to, like I mentioned, doesn't have to resolve to anything, and this subject alt name is more important than the common name, but I think it's just best practice to use them both there. And again, it doesn't have to resolve to an IP address, but again, it just makes it a bit simpler if it does. Again, increase those days. And now this time we're going to use TLS server, digital signature, and key encipherment. Okay, so there's our two servers there. Now we're just going to sign these, but we're going to sign them against the newly signed CA. There we go. And then we can select now the server one, do the same thing. There we are, done. There we are. Now we have our two certificates and our signing authority or certificate authority. So if you're not aware, the what the certificates are basically for, what the signing authority is for, the certificate authority, is actually, as you would on a normal certificate, it would have a signature on there from the accrediting body that would give you that certificate. This is basically signing that to verify that these certificates are genuine. However, because this isn't authorized on all devices yet, which is why we're going to have to export this one as well as these when we install them on both devices. So let's start with exporting. In fact, we'll just export them all. So CA, right click, export. Again, this is just need to be as a PEM file. We're going to do the client. We're going to export that. We're going to export that one as a PKCS12 file, because then we'll group the certificate and the private key together and give it a passphrase. And then you'll see when I do the server one, I'm going to do that as a PM file, and then give it a passphrase, and it's going to actually generate me a certificate and a key, two separate files. And it is important when we're installing the server file on the server certificate on the FreeRADIUS server that we do use a phrase as well, because if you don't put a phrase in here, it's not going to export you that key, and we need that key. But we also then need to unencrypt that key when we come to it. So I'll explain that when we get to it. So now we've got our certificates there. I'll go ahead and go to files, and you'll see they'll be in here. So I've got 4, as I mentioned. So I've got the
the server key and the server cert. I've got the CA cert, because remember we didn't give that one a password, and I've got this combined P12 which has the key and the cert together. Right, so we go ahead and download these 4. Right click download, and I'm just going to put this in my downloads folder. Okay, and you see, there we go. So the ones we're going to put on our server now is going to be our certificate authority and our 2 server ones. Now to transfer them across, I'm just using WinSCP, which is basically a file transfer application which runs on FTP or SCP, which is basically running on port 22, which is the same as SSH. So providing you can SSH to your device, then you'll be able to use it. So what we do is we just select the 2 server ones we want and the CA one. We just drag them across. There we go. Now we jump on my server, just doing ls, and as you can see there. Now this is set up already for my SQL side of it set up. As you can see, I've got this SQL org original because I've already done the configuration for the SQL side, which again is covered in that other video, so I won't go into that now. But what we are going to configure now is the EAP section. But before we get into that, what I'm going to do is sort my certificates out because they're currently in the wrong location. So firstly, we're going to move the CA and the server certificate, and we're going to put those in the FreeRADIUS certificates repository or directory. And if you're not familiar with Linux or Ubuntu, then I'll try and make it clear enough as I'm going through. So I'm not a root user, I'm a super user, but I'm not running it as a root, so I have to do sudo and then mv for move, because we're going to move these files, and then we're going to go the name of the file I want to move. So if you're using PuTTY, you can just double click and then right click, and then we're going to move it to etc FreeRADIUS, and then the directory is 3.0, and then certs / and now when you do the move command, if you specify the file name at the end, because at the moment these are just directories, you'll actually rename that file as well. And I'm going to just rename it to ca.cert. You don't have to do this step, but when it comes to the config file, I've already got that configured, which I'm going to copy and paste in, as I'll show you that. So I'm just going to make sure they match, but otherwise you'd have to update these names as well. Okay, there's a bit in my password the first time. There we go. Now we do the same for the server certificate. Server, we want the cert, not the key for the moment. So we just copy and paste this file path, and then we call this one server. Oops, caps lock. Server.cert. Now, before we move the key, we want to unencrypt it. So to do that, do open SSL RSA, and then in is going to be the input file, which is going to be cert. And there's the key, it's the only one in there. And then we just minus out, and we can rename this one as we do it. So this one's going to be server.key. It's going to ask us for the passphrase, the one that we set when we exported them. And there we go. So if I do ls now, you can see I've now got this server key. So now I can move my mv server key into that location. This time I'm not going to specify a name at the end, and then it will just move it as it is called. There we go. So now I can do an sudo ls minus la, so it puts them in order. There we go. We got CA cert, we got CA key and CA and server cert, and server key. But as you can see, because I
copied them across originally as my user. They named the user and the group is that, so we need to actually change it so it's the user that runs the FreeRADIUS server. So again, we do sudo chown for change ownership. We do -R for recursive, so do everything in the directory, and then we'll specify that user. So this is one's user, and we'll also change the group to match, and we'll just do it on that whole directory. So when I do that, the same again. There we go. You can see they've all updated. Now it's time to configure the EAP module. So this one is all the modules are stored in a folder called mods enabled. So if I do sudo etc, just copy this bit, mods-enabled. I haven't actually given it a command there. ls. Okay, here's all the ones in here. So the SQL one here is the one I've already configured. We're going to do this EAP one, and then we give it a so change the command to be nano. So nano is the text editor I'm going to be using. Just make sure you do that sudo at the beginning, because otherwise you'll make all your changes in here and then you'll try and save it and it'll tell you that you don't have the permissions to. So this is the file basically which we're going to configure. Now what I like to do to make it a bit clearer is, you can see we've got all this commented out text, which is basically just instructions about the file. So here you can see this is the private key file. This is the one we're gonna change. But what I like to do is we'll make a copy. So again, sorry, actually move, not copy. We'll move the whole file out. So again, we're going backwards the other way. So we're going to move the one out of there, but we're going to move it into the directory that I'm already in. So I can just put the name of the file. I don't have to specify the whole directory this time. And if I do ls now in the directory I'm in, now you can see I've got that. So I've just moved the original file into here. So if I do make any major errors, I can copy it back. And now that means when I go and edit this file, not move, sorry. Sorry, nano. So I'm going to edit this file now. It's a blank file. So what I've got is the config. Basically what I did, I exported the default config into Notepad++, and I removed all the lines with a comment. So it basically leaves you with all the actual used config in there, and then it's easier just to see which bits we need to change. So the bits we need to change is you need to specify the type to be TLS, and then we need to get this is the, as you can see, the directory path and the name of the certificate. Now this is what I said before, if you don't rename them, you just have to make sure you update them in here. So you're going to want the server key and the server cert. Make sure that key has been unencrypted, and then your CA there as well. Okay, so that's pretty much all we need to do in here. We can copy this and paste this in here. Now what I will do once when I you'll see by the time the video is live and you're watching it, hopefully there's a link in the description to a web page where I've put all this, I'll dump all this information in fairly high level, but if you follow along with the video, you'll be able to copy and paste the relevant bits. So hopefully you don't have to memorize what you're watching on the screen. So don't panic if I'm skipping over anything that you think you need to know. Okay, so that's all in. We've got our certificates in place. We've configured our EAP module. So now we can test it by doing sudo FreeRADIUS, and then just minus capital X, capital C, and I'll basically just start the service, run it through, and make sure that configuration. So if we've got if that one of those certificates wasn't in place, if we'd missed it, if we'd got a typo, it would then flag it here. So that's all good. Now what we're also going to do is make sure your FreeRADIUS service is not running, and then we can run this X. Basically means it runs in the foreground, but it's running live. So it's now running, but if I do Control X or Control C, sorry, it stops it again. So if I do sudo service FreeRADIUS status. As you can see, it's inactive. So by doing this, it's going to flag any errors, so it gives us the verbose output when we make connections to it. So it's just a way I like to do, just if I'm testing anything. But the one thing I will do now is I'm going to stop it, because I'm going to update the Radius database now, and every time you make a change to that database, you need to restart the service. So I would need to stop and start it, basically, for it to reread those config files, because it would pull that information out of the database. So this NAS section here, we need to add one in. So the NAS is basically your client device that's making the radius requests, which isn't the client connecting to the Wi-Fi, it's actually the MikroTik itself is going to make that request. So we need to put in here, insert the NAS name. Now the NAS name is the IP or resolvable DNS name, so don't just put something like radius server or router or something in here. It has to actually, if it's a domain, it has to resolve to this IP address. But in the short name here, you can just give it any name you like. And then for a secret, we can just pick something much more secure than that, but that'll do for testing. They're the key things you need to add. We go ahead on a MikroTik, and we go to, we can close this net for now, go to Radius, and we're going to add our Radius client details. So we want wireless. The address is the address of that Radius server, and then the secret is that one we just set. Now just make sure that whatever IP address you're hitting the Radius server from isn't natted along the way, because this IP that you're hitting needs to match, the IP address that you're hitting it from. So this is going to route out of my default gateway, which happens to be on my development network, and then this sits on the other side. Whereas if this was your local LAN and your server sat on there, it would be hitting it from presumably the interface IP you've got on your device. So then that just has to match there. Okay, hopefully that's clear. I do go into those sort of things and how to check that in that Radius video as well, so check those out. But it's caught me out a few times in the past, so I just always like to mention that. Okay, so we set that set. Now we can go ahead and add our client. So that's the rad check. Get it insert, and we'll just give it, so the username, we'll just call it client1. Attribute is clear text, not test, password. Operator is : equals, and then we'll just give this, the value is going to be the password we want. Again, I'm just going to use that hello world 123. Okay, now we've got that side of it set up, we can go back onto our Radius server and just start that again. Okay, no errors flagging up, which is good. Now we can go ahead and enable our wireless settings. So we go to security, create ourselves our security profile. So it's EAP2, WPA2 EAP, encryption, we'll just do CCNP, and then EAP, we want TLS for our methods, we want to verify certificates, and we want to tick the accounting box. Now we go into our configurations, select security, the new security profile, and then, what's happening there? There we go. Add that for both of those, which will apply to both of these. Then we can start these. Now something I have noticed, normally when you click in these, as you can see, we've populated from every other profile that we've selected. Doesn't seem to be appearing for the security, but the EAP one does. So I have tested this, and it's working, but it doesn't seem to appear here. So whether that's a bug or something I'm missing, I don't ever think I've noticed that before when I've used it for PSK. So don't be too alarmed. So now let's do some testing, shall we? So I'm going to start by just showing you it connecting without verifying that certificate. So on my phone,
We go into our Wi-Fi settings, and then we wait for it to, there we go, MikroTik masters 2G. So identity is going to be that username we created on the Radius rad check table. That password I set was 123, and then this time certificate we'd put do not validate. Now this option is being phased out, certainly a lot of Android devices. So which way I'll just show you the other way, which is the better way to go. But as you can see, there we are connected. And if we look under Wi-Fi registrations, there I am connected. Now we can also see on the Radius, there we go, we've got heaps of stuff come through. That was my request coming through and basically validating. Okay, now we go ahead and forget this. Now I'm going to go ahead and move the certificates. I'm going to move them onto the phone. To do that, I'm just going to use Google Drive, so which I've already got up here. Let's go and so we want the CA and the client this time. Just drag that across. Everything's upload. There we go. Now on my phone, there we are. So I can just download both of these. Now we go into the settings. We go security. We go down to more security settings, and then install from the storage device. So the first one is the CA certificate. Yep, installed anyway. There we go. I've got them in the downloads folder. So here's that CA one. Okay, that's installed. Now we go Wi-Fi certificate, again in download, and then we go the client one. And this is going to ask for that password or passkey. Okay, certificate name can be anything we like. We'll just call it that for now. There we go, that's installed. So we go back to our Wi-Fi settings. Connections, Wi-Fi. So now we connect again, and we fill out that once more. There we go. Now this time certificate, we can select that cert client one we just added. Now it's going to ask us to look for a domain. Now this is where I mentioned about that the server, when we did the server certificate. I remember I used the domain that I'd added. And again, it didn't matter that I'd added it to the DNS or not, but what mattered is that matches the one I set on that server certificate, and that's the one you can't change. And connect. There we go, connected. I'll just repeat that on the client. Sorry, on the 5G one. But what I'll do is I will get the password correct for the first instance, and then this time same certificate, but I'll just put in a mistype the, it doesn't really matter, mistype that domain, connect. There we go, this invalid domain, so that domain needs to match exactly what we do on the other one. Radius.MikroTik.masters, should have picked a smaller domain.com. Connect. There we go. Back on our MikroTik. There we go. I'm now connected on my 5G. So there we go. That's pretty much it. And again, you can install these certificates on your Windows devices, your Apple, iOS, whatever you like. Just make sure that those certificates are correctly configured and installed.
But yeah, if you've got any questions, any thoughts, any help you need, please comment below, and I'll get in touch with you at some point, and hopefully if not, see you on the next one. Cheers.